Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So in this video, we will explore the Firestore database offered by Firebase by building a small books management application used in the library. We will see how we can set up the Firebase configuration and perform the CRUD operation using the Firestore database from our React application. Let me show you the demo that we are going to build in this video. So this is the application that we are going to build. We have a small form where we can add the book title, book author, and the status of the book as available or not available. And then we have a button to add and update the book. So let's try to add a book. So I'm going to have a Node.js as a book title. Then in the author, I'm going to give the page, and by default, the book is available. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the not available, and then I'm going to add the book. So I'm going to click on the add. So as soon as I add it, the book is now added successfully in our Firestore database. And if we want to fetch the refreshed list, so let me click here and I will click on the refresh list. So it's going to give us the new list of the books that are available in the database. So now let's go and let's check. If I go to the Firestore, and here you will see that we have a collection of the books which has the documents, and each document has an ID on it. And if we see, then we have the fields which are added in the document as author, status, and title. So right now we have two records in our collection. So if I go back here, and we can see the two records here. Now, if we want to update an existing record, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this edit. And when I click on the added, the fields are automatically populated. And I want to change the author name as Malvia, and the status of the book I want to change as available. So I'm going to click on the available. Now I will click again on the add and update button, and that is going to update our record in the Firestore database. Now the book is updated successfully. So if we want to fetch the updated list, we just click on the refresh list and the list will get refreshed. And similar way, if we want to delete a record, then we can just click on the delete button, and the record will be deleted from our Firestore database. So I'm going to delete this as well, and we are going to delete all the books. And if we go to our database, then we will see that we have a collection of the books, but in that collection we don't have any documents. So if this sounds interesting, then stick around. Also, don't forget to subscribe the channel and press the bell icon so that you don't miss the videos like this one. So let's get started. Alright guys, so I have already bootstrapped my React application, and if you want to bootstrap your React application, then you can use npx create React app and the name of your application. Let me give you a quick walkthrough of the code that I have at the moment. So this is our application, and if I expand this, then we have the source folder and we have the public folder. And if we go to the package.json, then we have all the dependencies that I have already added to my project. And the additional dependency which I have already installed in my project is the Firebase, because we are going to use the Firestore database to do the CRUD operation. And the other one is the React Bootstrap, which will help us to get the React Bootstrap components for our UI. So if you want to install the Firebase, then you can simply install the npm install Firebase, and you will be able to install the Firebase in your project. And for the React Bootstrap, I have added the npm install React Bootstrap and the version of the Bootstrap. So this is what we have in our package.json. Now let's go to our source folder. So if I go to the source folder, then we have a components folder. And inside the components, what I have is I have two components, add book.js, and the other one is the book list. So if I go to the add book, then I have already created the JSX for the add book. So it's a simple form which will help us to add and update the books into our Firestore database. And I'm running my application on the local development environment. So if I go here, then we see that I have already running my application using npm start. So if we go to our browser, then this is how the application looks like. So this is what our component for the add book is. And the below one is the book list component, which is showing a table of all the records. So if we go back and in our app.js, then in the app.js, we simply have added some JSX, and inside the JSX, we are using the add book and we are using the book list. So I have only did the JSX part so that we don't waste much time on building the JSX. And also I have deleted all the unwanted files that I don't want for this project. And for the app.css, I have added some default CSS so that I can use them for my JSX. All right, now if we go back here, then here you will see that right now nothing is working. So it's just a pure HTML. So if I click on add and available, nothing is going to happen. If I click on add and update button, it's not going to happen anything. So right now there's nothing is happening here. So what we need to do is, first thing, we have to set up a Firebase project so that we can make use of the Firestore database. So if I go here to the Firebase console, the first thing you will do is you are going to click on the create a project, and you are going to give a name as React. I'm going to give a React CRUD. All right. So if I click on the continue, and then here I'm going to keep it everything as default, and then I'm going to click on the continue. All right. I'm going to select the location. So for me, the location will be India. So let me select India, and then I'm going to accept it, and I'm just going to click on the create project, and that is going to create our project. All right, so now our project is created. You can see here that your new project is ready. We are going to click on the continue button. So if we click on the continue, then we are going to see the dashboard of our project. So this is the dashboard of our project, and now the next thing we need to do is we are going to use this project into our React web application. So we are going to choose this web here. So I'm going to click on the web, and we need to provide a name to our application here. So I'm going to name it as CRUD app, and I'm just simply going to click on the register app. So this is going to register our application. All right, so now our application is registered, and now we can see that how we can connect our Firebase application to our React application. So the first thing we need to do is we need to install the Firebase into our project. And if we go back here and if we go to the package.json, then we see that we have already installed the Firebase in our project using npm install Firebase. All right. And the next thing we need to do is we need to add this kind of a configuration into our React application. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this and make sure that this configuration values will be different for you whenever you create your Firebase application. So I will go here, and what I'm going to do here is, so I'm going to create a new file. So I'm going to create a new file into my source, and I will name the file as Firebase config.js. So this is going to contain the configuration. So I'm going to paste everything here. All right. So I'm going to remove all the unwanted stuff which we don't want for the project. I will delete this as well, and I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to delete this as well. All right. So we have added, and now what we need to do is, first we have the initialize of the application which is coming from the Firebase app. And for this project, we don't need anything related to the analytics. So I'm going to remove this as well. And in the last, we will see that we are initializing this app. So we will have a constant of application, which is going to have an initialize function. And inside that function, we are going to pass the Firebase configuration, which we have for our application. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to import the get Firestore, because we are going to use the Firestore database. So here I'm going to have the get Firestore. All right, and this will be coming from the Firebase slash Firestore. So I'm going to add the Firestore here. All right, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove this. We don't want this analytics stuff. And I'm going to export a constant of db, which will be a reference to our Firestore database. So I'm going to have a dp, and I'm going to use this get Firestore, and inside this Firestore I'm going to pass the app. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to add the app here. All right, so we are done with our configuration, but now we haven't done anything with the Firestore in our Firebase console. So let's go back here, and if we go back to the console, so I'm going to click on continue to console, and here you will see that we have different tabs. So in our previous video we used the authentication methods. Now in this one we are going to use the Firestore database. So I'm going to click on the Firestore database. All right, and we have to create the database that we are going to use. So I'm going to click on the create database. We will use the database in the test mode because we are not making any application with the production ready. So there is a difference in the configuration for the production mode and the test mode. So if you see here, then there are some set of rules being added. So for the test mode, it automatically allows you to read and write on this database. But if we go to the production mode, then you will see that allow read and write if false. So if you are using the production mode, then you have to go here and you have to change this configuration to true so that you are able to read and write from the database. So for me, I'm going to use the test mode so that I have the default settings and I don't want to make any changes in this configuration. So I'm going to click here on the next, and we need to select the location where we are. So it's always advisable that you select the location where your customers are so that you get minimum latency in read and write operations. So for me, I am in the Asia, so I'm going to select the Asia Northeast 2, and then I'm going to click on the enable. So this is going to create a database instance in that particular region. All right, so my database instance is created, and here you will see that we have different tabs. So if I click on the rules, then here you will see that we have the rules here, and we can make the changes in the rules. So by default, this application is going to allow the read and write for the next 30 days. So let's go back to our data. So the first thing we need to do here is we need to create the collections. Since we are building a books management application, our collection name will be books. So if you are making some users application, then your collection can be users. If you are making a blog application, then your collections can be posts. So for me, the collection will be books. So I'm going to give the name as books. And you can treat this collection as if you're using an SQL database, then you give a name of your table. So we will be having a books table there. A similar way, we are going to have a collection ID here, which is the books. So I'm going to click here on the next. And what we want is, I want that whenever I create a new record or a new document, I want my ID to be auto-generated. So I'm going to click here as auto ID. So whenever I'm going to create a new record, it is going to create a ID automatically. And what fields we are going to have? So if I go back here, so we are going to have the book title, book author, and the status. So let's go here and let's add the field. So I'm going to add the field as title. It will be a string, and I'm going to add a book as Node.js. All right, I'm going to add another field which will be the author. So let me add the author, which is also going to be a string, and the author of our book is Dipesh Malviya. And the third one will be the status, whether the book is available or not available. So I'm going to add the field as status. I will make this as small s, and the status I'm going to give here as available. All right, then I'm going to click here save, and this is going to create a document. So if you see here, then we are going to have a document, and the fields in the document are author, status, and title. So I have misspelled the status here, so I'm going to delete this. All right, and I'm going to create a new field which will be the status. All right, I'm going to give the status as available, and I'm going to click on add. All right, so now we have one document in our Firestore database, and we already have the collection. Now let's use this collection into our React application. So what I'm going to do is I will go back to my code, and inside the code, what I will do is I'm going to create a new folder which will be the services. So I'm going to name it as services, and inside the services, I'm going to create a data layer which will have all the methods to do the CRUD operation between the React application and the Firestore database. So I'm going to create a new file inside this, and I'm going to give it as book services.js. And here what I'm going to do here is, first I'm going to import the DB instance which I have created in my Firebase config. So in the Firebase config, we already have a DB instance. So let's go here and let's import that DB instance. So I'm going to have the DB, and this will be coming from the / Firebase config. And the next thing we need to do is I'm going to import some Firebase methods which will help us to connect the Firestore with the React application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the collection. So this is going to give me the collection. So for us, the collection is the books. All right. And then I'm going to have the get docs. So this is going to give us all the documents from the Firestore. The next one is I'm going to have the get doc. If we want the individual document from the Firestore, we can use this get doc method. Then we are going to have the add doc, which will help us to add a new document to our collection. Then we are going to have the update doc. Similarly, we are going to have the delete doc. And in case if we want the document, then we can use the doc. All right. And all this will be coming from the Firebase. So I'm going to add the Firebase / and I'm going to have the Firestore. So these are all the methods defined in our Firestore so that we can make use of the CRUD operation from the React application to the Firestore. And if you want to explore more about this, then you can go to this link. So I'm going to add the link in the description. And here you will see that based on your application you are using, whether it's a web application or a mobile application, you will see the demo code that how you can add, delete, update, and read all the records from the Firestore. So I'm going to add the link of this documentation in the description so that you can use it for the reference. All right, now let's go back, and what we are going to do here is we are going to create a class. So let me have a class, and I'm going to give the name of the class as book data service. All right, so we have the class, and in the end I'm just going to export the instance of this book data service. So I'm going to have the export default. I'm going to use the new keyword, and I'm going to have the book data service. And then what we need to do here is that the first thing we need to have the collections, the books collection reference. So to get the books collection reference, what we can do here is I'm going to create a constant, and I'm going to name it as book collection ref. So this is going to give me the reference of my collection, which is the books. So I'm going to use the collection. So in the collection, what we need to do is the first parameter to this collection is the Firestore instance we have in our application. So the Firestore instance we have is the DB. So I'm going to have the DB. All right. And then what is the name of your collection which you want as a reference? So for us, the collection name is the books. So if we go here and we see that the name of our collection is the books. So we are going to pass books here. So I'm going to add the books. All right. So now we have the books collection reference, and then now we can start creating methods here. The first one I'm going to try is the add books. So I'm going to write the add books, and this is going to be an arrow function. And what it's going to take here is it's going to take the new book. So whenever we want to add a new book to our collection, we are going to use this new book. And what I will do here is, and this is going to return us the add doc, and we are going to pass the reference of our collection. So the reference is book collection ref, and then you will pass the new document which you want to add. So I'm going to use here the new book. All right, so I have misspelled the return. So let me change this. So what we have done is we are going to take a new book, and then we are going to pass this new book to our collection reference, which we have taken it here. So this is the books, and you have to add a new book to this books collection. All right. Similarly, let's do the update. So we are going to finish all the services first, and then we just have to use those services into our application. So for the other one is I'm going to use the update book, and whenever I want to update a book, what I have to do here is first I will need the ID, and I will need the updated book. So I'm going to have the new book doc, which is the updated, or we can just write the updated book. All right. And whenever we want to do it, first we need to check that whether the particular book exists in our collection or not. So for that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have the constant book doc. So this is going to check that you have the document in your collection or not. So I'm going to use the doc. The first argument to this doc will be the Firestore reference which we have, which is the DB. So I'm going to add the DB. And the second argument will be the collection. So the name of our collection is the books. And the third argument will be the ID. So based on this ID, we are going to fetch the doc. All right. And now what we will have is we need to update this book doc with the updated book. So I'm going to give here as return, and I'm going to write the update doc. And in the update doc, we are going to add the existing document, which is the book doc, and we're going to have the updated doc, which is the new document. All right. So we have done this for the update. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to add it here. Now, the next thing we will do is for the delete books. So let me add the delete book. And to add the delete book, we only need the ID of the book. And then we are going to return the delete doc. And when we need to delete the doc, we first have to check that whether particular document exists or not. So to check that, what we can do here is we can fetch the same way we have fetched for the updated book. So we will see this. And if we find this, then we are just going to delete this. All right. So we have done that. And the next one we need to do is get all the books. If we want to fetch all the list of the books in our Firestore database, then we can use the get all books. And this will not take any argument. And it's going to be an arrow function. And we are going to return with the get docs. And we just have to pass the reference of the books collection. All right. So I'm going to have the F here. And the last one is if we want to get an individual document. So if we want an individual book, so whenever we are going to do an edit, we first have to fetch the individual book so that we can populate the values. So for that, I'm going to have the get book, and I'm going to pass the ID. So based on this ID, I want to get the book. So I'm going to do a constant book doc, which will be equals to the doc. And in the doc, we have to pass the Firestore reference. Then we have to pass our collection name, and then we pass the ID. All right. And then we just return. So let me return the get docs, and I'm going to pass the book doc. All right. So now we have added all the methods to do the CRUD operation with the React and the Firestore. Now it's just that how you are going to use this service layer into our application or into our components. We have this and we are going to test this. So I see that there is a problem here. We have a delete doc. So if we go here, then we have misspelled it. So let me add the delete doc. And for this, we are just going to have the get docs. So now these methods, we will use it in our components. So now let's go first and let's start doing the addition of the new books. So what I will do here is I will go to my add book component. And the first thing here we need to do is we need to create the state variables so that we can bind those state variables with our form control. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a constant, and then I'm going to have a title. Then we are going to have the set title, and this is going to be use state. All right. And then I'm simply going to copy this for the other one. So for the other one, we are going to have the author. So let me have the author, and then I'm going to have the set author. All right. And now what we can do here is if we go to our form control, we can actually add the value here. So let me add the value. So the value for this will be title, and the value for this will be author. All right. And this form is completely based on the React Bootstrap. So if you go to the documentation, you are going to find all the form elements as it is, and you can just do a copy paste. All right. And the next thing we need to do is we need to write an on change so that we can set the value. So I'm going to write an on change. This is going to have an event. I will have the arrow function, and I'm going to write the set title, and the title will be event.target.value. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to add a very similar to the author as well. And we are going to change this set title to set author. All right. So we have this, and what we need to do is whenever we click on the button for the add or update, we need to have a submit handler. So I will go here in the form, and then in the form, we are going to add the on submit, and we are going to use the on submit as handle submit. All right. So now let's write this handle submit. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have the constant. I'm going to have the handle. So for meanwhile, I will just close this. All right. I will have the handle. I'm going to write the submit, and this handle submit is going to be an arrow function. All right. And so this is going to have an event, and I'm going to add a async, since this is going to be an async event. Whenever we make a add document or whenever we interact with the Firestore, it always returns a promise. So I'm going to add a async here, and I'm going to write the event dot prevent default, so that whenever we click on the submit, it prevents our page to get refreshed. All right. And I'm also going to take another state variable so that we can have error messages. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the constant. I'm going to have the message, and we are going to have the set message. All right. And this will be equals to the use state. And here I'm going to have an object where I will have the error as false, and then I'm going to have the message as empty. So this is going to help us to show the error messages and the successful messages. So what I want that initially my messages should be empty, so that I'm going to give it as empty. And now what we are going to do is we are going to make a check on the title and the author. So if I have a title which is empty, or our author which is also empty, then in that case what we want is we need to set an error message. So I'm going to have the set message, and in the set message what I will do is I'm going to have the error as true and the message as all fields are mandatory. All right. And then I will just return from this function. All right. So we have done it for the empty and the error messages. But if we don't have the empty title and the empty author, then in that case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a constant with a new book. So we are going to have a new book which we want to add in our collection. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the title as title. All right. And since we are using ES6, so I'm going to give it as simple title. The other field will be the author, and we are going to have the status. All right. So this is our new record. And if I go and let's do a console.log, of this new book. All right, so I will go here. I will do a inspect element. I will click on the console and I will just clear the console. Now let me try add Node.js. I'm going to give it as Amit. I'm going to give it and I'm going to click on the update. So you will see that if I click on the update and let me zoom this, then we see that we have the new book which we want to add into our Firestore collection. All right, so now let's go back. And now what we are going to do here is let me add a try statement. All right, and in the try statement, what I will do here is I'm going to have the await and I will have the book data service. So I have imported the book data service from here and we are going to use the book data service. So let me add an import statement. So I'm going to import the book data service and this will be coming from the /services/book services. All right, so we have the book data service, and to this book data service what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the dot and it's going to give us the add books. So I'm going to add the books and here I'm going to pass the new book. All right, and once the book is added, I want to set the message as a book added successfully, something like that. So I'm going to have the message, and to this message what I will do here is I'm going to have the error as false. So this is not an error, and I'm going to have the message as new book added successfully. And now what we need to do is if there is an error while adding a book, we need to catch that error. So I'm going to have the catch here that will going to have an error, and I'm going to set the message again. All right, and in this case the error message will be true and our message will be error.message. All right, and once we have added the book, we need to clear the fields for the title and the author. So for that what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the set title as empty and let's add the author as well, and the set author will also be empty. So now we have done this, and now let's give a try and let's add a document. So what I will do here is I'm going to go before that I will also like to add the alert so that we can see the error messages and the non-error messages. So what I will do here is I'm going to add an alert. So if we go to the Bootstrap documentation, then I'm going to use this kind of an alert which can have an error message. So what I will do here is let's go here and I want to display this error message whenever we have the message. So I'm going to give this as optional dot message property on it. So whenever we have this, I want to display the alert message. So I'm going to add the message and then I'm going to have the alert. I'm going to have the variant and let's have a variant, conditional variant. So whenever I have the message and on that message, if I have the error as true, then in that case, I'm going to have the variant as danger because that will be an error message. But if that is not an error message, then I'm going to have the variant as success because it's a success message. And then I'm going to have dismissible, which is going to give me a cross icon so that whenever I can click on the cross icon, I can close it. And then I'm going to have a on close, and then on whenever I click on the cross icon, I'm just going to empty the message. So that's why this alert message will be disabled. So I'm going to have an arrow function and I'm going to have the set message as empty. All right. So this is nothing fancy. It's a pure JSX and a bit of JavaScript logic. I will close the tag and then here we need to display the message. So I'm going to save it first so that we have the alignment properly. And here what we need to display is I'm going to have the message, and on the message if I have the MSG message property. All right, so now let's go to the browser and let's test it. So if I go here and if I click on the add update, then we see that all fields are mandatory, but we don't see any space here. So let's add that space. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove this from here and I'm going to simply add it here. So now we have the space properly. So now let's give a try to add a record in our collection. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select as JavaScript tutorial and I'm going to select it as Amit, and this book is available. And then I'm going to click on the add and update. So if I click on it, then we should be able to add the record into our collection. So now we see that the new book added successfully. We can verify if we go to our Firestore, and here we see that this is our second record, which is Amit available and the JavaScript tutorial. Now we don't have any mechanism to fetch all the updated list or all the records from our Firestore. So if we go back here, then we have to work on our book list. So now let's go and let's work on this book list component. And now let's go to our book list. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to close this as well. We don't want this and we don't want this as well for now. So let's go to the book list. And in the book list, what we need to do is we need to fetch all the new records from the Firestore database. So what I will do here is if we go here, then I'm going to make use of a use effect. So let me add the use effect, and inside the use effect we are going to have an arrow function, and we want this to be run only once. So I'm going to add a empty array, and now we need to make a call to our method, which is the get docs. So what I will do here is let's write a function of get books, and we need to write the function for this get books. So what I will do here is I'm going to have a constant get books, and this is going to be an arrow function, and we are going to use the async as we are using the async await because it's going to return a promise from the Firestore. So I'm going to have a constant data, and this data will be the await. Let's have the book data service. So we have to import it. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to copy simply this and let's add it here. And here, if I use dot, then we're going to have the get all books. So this is going to give us all the books from the Firestore database. So what we are going to do is I'm going to create a state variable here so that I can have the books array. So what I will do is I'm going to have a constant with books, set books, and this will be equals to the use state, and we are going to have an empty array. So if I go here and if I do a console.log and let's log the data. So I'm going to log the data, all right, and misspell the console. Then we are going to see whatever the information we are getting from the Firestore. So let me change this to data.docs. All right. And now if I go here and if I do a console log, then we should be able to see something in the console log. So you will see here that we have two arrays from which is coming from the Firestore, and we have two records. That's why we have the two entries here. So what we will do is we are going to take this data, we will store it in this books array, and then we are going to display it in our table. So now what we are going to do here is that I'm going to set the books with these documents or whatever the record we have get from the Firestore. So I'm going to have the set books, and inside the set books I'm going to have the data.docs.map on it, and then I'm going to get the individual document, and then I'm going to have the arrow function, and inside the arrow function what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a spread operator of all the docs.data, and the other one will be the ID. I want the ID. So for that, I'm going to have the ID, and I'm going to give here the doc.ID. So I'm going to change this to doc. All right. So now we have set the books. Now we have all the books in the our books. So let's add a pre statement here and let's see. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a pre, and inside the pre, what I will have, I'm going to have the JSON.stringify, and then I'm going to have the books. I'm going to have the undefined, and I'm going to have the two. All right. I will also remove these two and I will save it. Now let's go and let's see. So if I go here, if I close this, then you will see that these are the records we have in our Firestore database. Now we just need to loop through this and we need to display them in our table. So let's go back here. And what I will do here is, so we have to make this dynamic. So whatever the values we have in our books array, we have to display them here. So let's display them. So what I will do is I'm going to have the books dot map on those books, and that is going to give me an individual document. And I'm also going to take the index. I will have the arrow function, and here we can actually return the JSX which we want. So I'm going to have a return here, and in the return JSX, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this, I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to add it here. And here I'm going to pass the key. So let me add the key, and the key will be doc.id. For the first one, I'm going to have the index. So let me add the index plus 1. Since the index of our array will start from 0, so I want my serial number of the record from 1, 2, 3. That's why I'm adding a plus 1. Here we are going to add the doc.title. Here we are going to add the doc.author, and here we are going to add the doc.status. So we have it, and we will also write the on-click function for the edit and the delete button. So if I go here, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add the on click, and let me add the event, and this event will have the get book ID, and I'm going to pass the doc.id because whenever I want to edit a document, I need the ID of that document. So I'm going to copy this, I'm going to add it here as well, and here I'm just going to change this to delete handler. All right, so now we need to write the get book ID and the delete handler. So if I go up, and let's write the delete handler first, because it's very easy to write the delete handler. So what I will do here is I'm going to have a constant delete handler, and this is going to be equal to an arrow function. So let me write an arrow function, and I'm going to have an async because it's going to return us a promise from the Firestore database. And what I will do here is I'm going to have the await book data service dot delete. So that is going to delete our book, but we need to pass an ID. So what I will do is I will have the ID here, and I'm going to pass the same ID here. So let me add the ID here. And what I will do is as soon as I delete the ID, I want to refresh my list. So I'm going to call the get books. So now let's go and let's test it. So if I go here and if I refresh it, then we are having that get book ID is not defined. So for now, let's remove this. We will use it later on. So I'm going to just comment this out so that it works. All right. And we will also remove this pre so that we can see properly. So I'm going to comment this out as well. And now we see that we have two records, which is the Node.js and JavaScript tutorial, and both these are coming from the Firestore database. So if we go here, then we see we have two records, and we can see here we also have the two records. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a button here which is going to refresh the list whenever we add a new record. So let's go back and let's add a button. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to write a div with a class name. All right. And I'm going to give as margin bottom 2. And then inside that, I'm going to have a button with a variant, and I'm going to give the variant as dark edit, and then I'm going to have the on click. So let me have the on click, and whenever I want to click on this refresh button, I need to call the get books. So I'm going to have the get books. So let me add the get books here. All right, I'm going to close this button and I'm going to name it as refresh list. So we have made a mistake here. So this button should be capital because it's a bootstrap component. And if we go here, then we see that we have a list. Now let's give a try and let's do add a new record. So I'm going to add a PHP complete guide 3. I'm going to name it as the Nikesh. The book is not available, and I'm going to click on add. So we see that now the new book is added successfully, and we need to refresh the updated list. So I'm going to click on the refresh list, and we are going to get the new book. So now our create a new record is working, and also get all the record is working. Now let's give a try to the delete because we have already returned the delete functionality. So if I click on this delete, then we should be able to delete. So we see that now the record is deleted, and we get the refresh updated list. So if I delete again, then we are able to delete it again. All right. And if we go here, then we see that the record is also getting deleted from our collection in the Firestore database. Now, the only thing we need to do here is we have to write the edit, because right now we don't have the edit functionality. So what we want is whenever I click on the edit, I need to fetch the data first, and then I need to pass that data to my add component so that I can populate the values. So what I can do here is let's go back, and here what we will do here is if we go to our app component, then inside the app component, I'm going to take a state variable of the book ID. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a constant. I'm going to have the book ID, and then I'm going to have the set book ID. All right. And this will be equals to the use state, and I'm going to have the empty state. And what I want is whenever I click on the edit, I need the ID in my app component. So I'm going to pass the prop in the book list. So here I'm going to have the get book ID, and this will be equals to the get book ID handler. All right, I need to implement the get book ID handler. So what I'm going to do here is let's implement this. So I will come here. I'm going to write a constant get book ID handler, which is going to give me an ID. All right. And whenever I get the ID, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the ID as book ID, and I will have the ID here. And I will also do a console log of this ID so that we see that we are getting a proper ID or not. So I'm going to have a console log and the ID of document to be edited. So I'm going to have the ID here. So what we need to do is, now we have passed this prop. Let's use this prop in our book list. So I will go here in the book list and let's destructure the prop first. So I'm going to destructure the prop and add the get book ID. Now we can use this and we can have a on click here. Now uncomment this out. And now let's see that if we click on the edit button, are we able to get the ID in our app component or not? So I will go here, I will refresh it, but I'm getting a use state not defined. So I'm going to go to my app.js, and here if you see that, let's import the use state. So I'm going to have the use state, and that use state will be coming from the React. So we have this, and now what we need to do is whenever I click on the edit button, I need the ID to be in my app component. So if I go to the console and let's go here, I'm going to delete this and I will clear the console, and if I click on the edit, then I see the ID of the document to be edited and I get the ID. Now I need to pass this ID to my add book component so that I can fetch the data and I can populate it. So what I'm going to do here is, let's go back here and let's pass the data with the prop. So I'm going to go here, I will come here and I'm going to pass the ID. All right, and this ID will be equals to the book ID, and along with this I'm also going to pass the set book ID, and that will be equals to the set book ID. So now I have passed the props. Now we can use these prop in our add book component. So let's go to the add book component, and here I'm first going to destructure the props. So let me destructure the prop. I will have the ID and I'm going to have the set book ID. And now what we need to do is, first I'm going to run a use effect to check that whether the ID value is defined or undefined. Because what we are going to see here is that if we have the ID value, then in that case we want this button to work as update a record. But if the ID is undefined, then in that case we want this button to work as a add button. So let's go down and I'm going to import the use effect, and then I'm going to write a use effect in the end. So I will have the use effect, and then I'm going to have an arrow function, and I want to run this use effect whenever the value of the ID changes. So I'm going to add the ID here, and here I'm going to make a check that if my ID, so let me have the ID is not equals to undefined, that means my ID is not equal to the undefined, and if my ID is not equals to empty, because whenever we are going to edit, in those cases my ID will not be undefined and my ID will not be empty. So that in that case what I will do is I'm going to have an edit handler, and let me do a console log here so that you can see that what cases the ID will be undefined and empty. So I'm going to have the ID here is ID. I'm going to comment this out. All right, so now let's go here and let's refresh the page. I'm going to do an inspect element and I'm going to do a console log here. So now you will see that if I click on the edit, then in that case in the add book I have the ID. So that means I have to update the record now. But what if I just do let's add a new values. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to refresh it, and if I refresh it, then here you will see that the ID here is empty. So if I want to add a new record, so let me add a PHP and I'm going to add Amit Dubey. Let's click on the add. So in this case, a new record is added. I will just refresh the list. All right. And now you will see that if I click on the edit, so now in this case, I have the ID. Now what I will do is I will first fetch the record and then I will populate the values here. So let's go back, and here I'm going to have the edit handler. And in the edit handler, what we need to do is first we need to fetch the data from the Firestore database. So I'm going to have a constant, I'm going to have the edit handler, and this edit handler will have a arrow function. I'm going to change this to, I'm going to add a sync here, as this is going to return a promise. And here first I'm going to do a set message as empty. And then what I will do is I'm going to try, and I will have first I will fetch the document from the Firestore so that I want to populate the values. So I'm going to have the constant, I will have a doc snap, and I'm going to write an await here. All right, I will have the book data service, and then I'm going to have the get book. I have to pass the ID because based on the ID we are going to fetch the book. And now what we will do here is if I get the doc snap, then I can set the values to the title. So I'm going to have set title, and this will be the doc snap dot data, and on this data I have the title, so that is going to fetch the title. All right, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to add it. So this will now change to author, So let me have the author. This will now change to author. This is going to change to status. So let me change this to status, and this will become status. And if this operation fails, then in that case, I'm going to catch the error. So let me have the error. And here what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set the message, and I'm going to have the error, and the value of the error will be true, and the message will be whatever the error message I have message. So now we have fetched the record from the Firestore database. Now we have got the value. We just need to populate the value into our form. So this is how it's going to populate the value in the form. So if we go back and if we test it, and also let me do a console log of the doc snap. So I'm going to do a console.log, the record is, and I'm going to have the doc snap.data. Now let's go and let's test it. So if I go here, if I refresh my page, then we have missed the comma. So let me add the comma here. All right. Now if I click on the edit, then you will see that we are populating the values to edit the document. And we also see the record which is to be edited is this one, which we are getting it from the docsnap.data. So we are now able to edit it. Now, if I click on this button, in this case, it should not add a record, but it should update a record. So if we go here and if we see that this is our submit handler, and inside the submit handler, what we will do is we are going to define the condition, which is that if the ID is undefined and if the ID is not empty, that means I want to update my record. So what I will do here is I will have if my ID is not equals to undefined and my ID is not equals to empty, then in that case, what I want to do, I want to update my record. Otherwise, I want to create a new record. So what I will do here is I'm going to copy this and then let's add it here. And in this case, what we will do here is we will change this to updated successfully. And here instead of add doc, we are going to call the update book, and we have to pass the ID to update the book. So we have added this, and what we need to do is as soon as we update the record, we need to empty the ID. Otherwise, every time we are going to get the value in the ID. So here what I will do is I'm going to set the book ID to be empty. All right. So now we have done the update part also. It's a bit tricky. We can do this in a multiple ways, but I'm not using the context API just to avoid a lot of complexity in the project. That's why we have used this approach. All right, so now let's go back and now let's test it. So what I'm going to do here is we will change this to not available, and then I'm going to click on the update, and you see that the update is successfully. Now let's refresh it. So if I refresh the page, then you will see the value is changed. All right, so now our CRUD operations are working fine. Let's give a try on all the functionalities. So I'm going to close this. And first, let's create a new record. So the new record will be my React Firebase tutorial, and the author will be Dipesh Malviya. And I'm going to click on the available as the tutorial will be available. Let's click on the add. Now you will see that the new book added successfully. So if I click on the refresh list, then we see that this is our new record. If we go to our Firebase console, then we will see that we have 3 records, and we are able to fetch all the 3 records. Now let's give a try and let's update this. So I'm going to click on the edit, and as soon as I click on the edit, you will see that we have the values populated. So I'm going to have React Firebase CRUD tutorial, and now I'm going to change this to not available. And now let's click on the button. So if I click on the button, now in this case, it's going to update the record. So if I click on it, then update it successfully. Let's refresh the list, and you will see that React Firebase CRUD tutorial, and the value changes automatically. Let's give a try on the delete. So if I click on it, it's going to delete the record, and it's going to delete the record, and it's going to delete the record. So this is how easy it is, and you usually use the Firebase if you are a front-end developer and you don't know about creating the APIs and the backend system, then you can make use of the Firestore database. So that's all I have in this video. I hope you liked the video. A thumbs up is appreciated. You can also connect with me via Facebook or Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter for latest updates. I'm going to add the link of the code in the description so that you can download it and play around it. And please help me to grow the channel by hitting the like button. Thank you. Thanks for watching.